So it's been about a couple of months since we set up this peat swamp black water biotop tank. If you haven't seen the video of how we put it all together, here is a link somewhere. You can watch how we escaped this tank and how it actually matured through all the processes that it went through. This was very much an experiment because instead of substrate I have used a layer of peat moss soil and nothing else. So basically I've added quite a thick layer of peat moss soil on the bottom of the tank, and I was quite concerned that it's going to float around, that it's not going to stay on the bottom because it's very light and it has no weight to it. So I was quite afraid that it's not going to work, but it did actually work quite fine. I will take you through everything that happened to this tank ever since, what has worked, what has basically failed. The point of this video is to show you how I'm going to shut this tank down and how I'm going to take it to pieces and how I'm going to take all this hardscape and use it in my other tanks. The reason why I'm shutting down this tank is basically comes down to two things. The first one is saving on energy. We live in Scotland in the UK, and from October we should have some significant nearly 80% increase in the cost of electricity and gas, and so every little bit helps. And this tank is actually my most energy consuming tank. It has chocolate gourami and chili rasbora in here, and both of these species they require a relatively warm temperature, so I have to heat this tank up. And as you can see, it's an open top tank, so no matter how much I heat it, I lose quite a lot of heat because the heat just comes out from the top and there's no lid. This room is a relatively chilly room, especially in winter. So once winter comes, it will be even harder to heat this tank, to keep it at higher temperatures, and it will be kind of an exercise in futility, so to say. So that's one of the reasons. The second reason is chocolate gourami. They breathe atmospheric air, so they actually breathe air from outside the tank, which means that if the temperature of the water is significantly higher than the temperature of the air, they can get sick. They will basically swallow this cold air, and they can get all sorts of diseases because of that, and they're most likely not going to last long enough. Because of them, we can't really increase the temperature of our flat to the level that they require, which is about 27 or 28 degrees Celsius, and that's a bit too hot for us, and that's probably going to consume tons of energy to actually keep this whole flat at 28 degrees Celsius. Well, now you're probably thinking that I can just remove this chocolate gourami from here and keep the tank as this, and believe me, I have tried to do that. Whenever I try to net them from this tank, they just dart to the back of the tank, behind the driftwood, somewhere into the leaf litter, behind these bamboo sticks, and there's no chance for me to catch a single one without taking down this tank completely, because it's impossible to catch them in here. That's the only option for me to actually remove the gourami from this tank, is to shut this tank down. Well, yeah, so this is a difficult decision to make, because I like this tank and I grew accustomed to it, and it looks really nice actually. It has this biotop vibe about it. The experiment with peat moss substrate worked quite fine. Actually, this layer of peat moss, it keeps on releasing tannins non-stop. I've done massive water changes on this tank a few times, but the substrate keeps on releasing tannins, and the water is really soft and acidic. It actually has no hardness at all. GH stays at 0, KH stays at 0, and conductivity is below 10 ppm. So it's a true acidic black water environment, and fish are thriving in here. They absolutely enjoy these black water conditions. Plants, well, certainly I've lost all the floating plants, apparently because they can't handle this black water conditions, and there's probably acidity levels are a bit too much for these floating plants. But other than that, Peace lilies have been growing quite well, and there's lots of fresh leaves popping up. In here I've got some Riparium moss, which grows half immersed, and it's actually enjoying this condition. Over here I've got this asparagus moss, which has been thriving as well, and it's actually growing quite large. And I've had asparagus fern in my other tanks as well, but I never had much luck with it, so it usually kind of stays alive for a while and then it dies down after a while. But this time this asparagus moss it's absolutely thriving. Basically its roots are covered by this sphagnum moss, and they're growing. It sits on top of this log from this piece of driftwood from an oak tree, and its roots are growing down into the tank, so it's doing great actually. It's a difficult decision to shut this tank down, but it's probably the best decision to make, considering that it's really hard to heat this tank, and it's also impossible for me to remove chocolate gourami from here without actually taking down the entire tank. And I know if I keep them in here, it's gonna get cold literally next month. Now it's September. In October it's going to get quite cold outside, so this room will be quite chilly. It will be around 20-22 degrees Celsius. Obviously this air will be too cold for them, so I will lose them anyways, so I need to remove them to save them. I will rehome them, and I will find a proper owner, a proper house for them. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's take this tank apart, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to use these plants, this hardscape, and how I'm going to move the rest of the fish to other tanks, which probably will be interesting to watch. Siphoned out some water, and now I'm going to check these bamboo sticks, which was actually another experiment because I have never previously used real dry bamboo in my aquariums, and these are real bamboo sticks, and they had some pulp inside, so I was really interested how well. They're still very firm. They certainly changed color, but I don't think there's anything significantly wrong with them. Yeah, they're still very firm, and it doesn't look like they have been damaged by staying underwater for such a long time, so probably it makes sense to use them in my other tanks as well. No, they're definitely really firm, and there's absolutely no effect on them. Well, this one didn't even change much of its color, so actually it has gotten a bit darker, but overall I think it has survived staying in water quite well. So these are just regular bamboo sticks which I bought on eBay. I think they're used for some kind of a home decor or this type of things, and they're definitely not designed for fish tanks. And this is a peace lily, spatifilum plant, which I had in there, and actually you can see there is quite a lot of fresh growth on the roots, and there are some fresh leaves like this one. I'm going to replant it in my other tank. This is some sphagnum moss. I also have here this lucky bamboo dracena plant, and I think it was growing Don't think it was doing too well. Yeah, the roots are falling off. Yeah, it's probably not a good environment for it. Yeah, there's a lot of roots that have died out. I also had here this golden pothos, and I think it was doing fine. There's some fresh roots and some fresh leaves popping up. That's another peace lily. Not as healthy, although yeah, it's actually quite fine. There are some fresh leaves in here. You would probably be able to see that this kind of a coastal area which I have over here, it's basically holds on this broken piece of coconut pot. This was a regular coconut fiber pot which is used for potting houseplants. I just cut it into one piece and I've used it to kind of create this coastal area. On top of that coastal area we have some sphagnum moss and we have this Fittonia plant growing. This spotlight lamp is actually from IKEA. This is not an aquarium lamp, but I think they provide a really nice kind of a spotlight effect in your tank. They show certain area of your tank really nicely. Well, this Fittonia plant, I think it wasn't doing great either. It looks like, well, yeah, it's been probably dying. Definitely mostly dead. And this is a mini monstera. Actually, it wasn't doing well before I added it to this tank, but now I think it's recovering. There's some fresh roots. And that's the only piece of floating plants, a piece of water lettuce, which has still survived in here, miraculously and remarkably. All of this sphagnum moss I'm either going to reuse in my other tanks or I'm going to put it in my sphagnum moss container where I'm trying to grow it actually. Yeah, you can see here that this broken coconut fiber pot has served as a sort of an island area, and I'm going to reuse it somewhere sometime. I'm not going to throw it away. In here I have a piece of oak tree bark, and I'm going to check its condition right now. Well, actually it's in excellent condition. A bit soft, but other than that perfectly fine to be reused in my other tanks. Well, here in the back I had a return pump or a flow pump which was pushing air through this spray bar. I think it's an Eheim spray bar, and it was pushing water into the sphagnum moss. One problem with this system was that it was often clogging, so because of peat moss substrate, some of the peat moss substrate will actually get stuck in the pump, or it will get into the spray bar and get stuck somewhere here blocking the flow. These are twigs, oak tree twigs, which we collected in the forest nearby, and they actually look great. I did something that I hoped that I would be able to avoid. I just touched the substrate, and quite a lot of peat moss actually went up, so that's not a good thing, but that's something that cannot be avoided. There's quite a lot of Riparium moss which was growing on top of that piece of driftwood, and I'm going to reuse it in my other tanks. There's also some Java moss in here mixed up with sphagnum moss. So normally when I take down some of my tanks, I'm always trying to reuse literally everything that's in that tank, trying not to actually throw anything away. The next thing I'm going to do is to remove. Okay, that's collapsed. I'm going to remove this asparagus moss. Yeah, you can see it was actually growing quite well. That's another piece of driftwood with some Java moss growing on it, which I will be reusing. This is a large piece of mangrove driftwood. I will reuse it as well, but I'm not quite sure whether I will reuse it right now or at some later point. That's a smaller piece of mangrove driftwood. Well, I really like mangrove driftwood because of its texture, but it's also kind of decomposing and falling into pieces much faster than other types of driftwood. And this is an oak tree log or piece of oak tree with a bark on it, and I can see that bark is basically falling off, so I'll probably have to clean it off. Oh, it doesn't smell well at all. And this is something I was afraid of. Much of the substrate is up now, and I can hardly see any fish, but have to do what I can to actually catch them. So this is a tank where chocolate gourami will stay until I will rehome them, and this water is actually from their tank. You can see how dark it is. It's like almost like black coffee dark. And there's one chili raspberry which made its way here, but I will remove it. I will also add some leaf litter from their tank to this tank so they will feel comfortable, and I will have a lid on this tank so it's actually going to stay warm, and they will hopefully be comfortable in here for the time being. So I've managed to catch, I think, probably most of chili raspberries, and oh, there's still a few of them in there. I just have to wait until water settles down, and I would be able to see something in there. So this is what I've got so far: some chili raspberries and Untitled catfish. I'm going to add them to my other black water tank, which is actually a biotop tank of Rio Negro in the Amazon, and clearly adding chili raspberries, which are from Southeast Asia, is going to ruin its biotopness. But I'm quite attached to these chili raspberries, and I don't want to rehome them, and I don't have any other tank for them for the moment, so I'm going to add them to that biotop tank. And well, I'm going to add all of them in here, and obviously after I add chili raspberries in here, this is not going to be a biotop anymore, because chili raspberries do not live in South America, they live in Southeast Asia. But in the near future, possibly in October, I'm going to build a custom-made riverbank background for this tank, so it will be on the wall and in the tank, so it will be kind of an imitation of a river bank made of different materials, and covered with peat moss, which will be glued to a piece of plywood. And there will be all of these riparium plants on top of this background. So when I will be doing that, I will remove chili rasboras from here. But for now, they are going to live in here, which is also a black water setup and possibly quite great for them. So we have added this big piece of mangrove driftwood to our main display tank. That's the tank, and I wasn't quite sure if it looks alright in here, so I've added some java moss onto it, hoping that it will start growing. And one of the peace lilies is also here, just this one here. I put it kind of on top of that driftwood, so hopefully it will grow. It should get some light from this lamp over here. And our brochis catfish don't seem to be too happy about this new addition, but they will get used. So it's been day 2, and yesterday I spent several hours trying to catch one by one all of this about 20 chili rasboras hiding in this dark and murky peat soil substrate water. And I had to stop filming at some point because it was already getting dark and I had to leave things the way they are. So now I'm going to pump out the rest of this water, and I'm going to use all of this substrate as sort of a nutritious fertilizer for our house plants, because it's a really rich substrate, not only because it consists of peat moss, but also because it's kind of mixed up with fish feces and all sort of stuff that was basically decaying on the bottom of this tank. And I think that would be a perfect fertilizer for house plants.